My mother stood up in the middle of church and called me a fraud. 30 seconds later, a burned man dropped to his knees and started crying. That's when 200 people realized one of us had been lying for years. And it wasn't me. My name is Kiara Walker. At the time, I was a United States Navy officer sitting in the front pew of a packed church sanctuary. I had flown across the country on almost no sleep after deployment at sea. The church had invited me to speak. My mother had invited herself to destroy me. The moment she stood, I felt it. The shift, the tension, the kind of silence that settles over a room when people sense disaster before it arrives. Linda Walker, my mother, the woman who hadn't truly looked at me in 20 years. She pointed directly at me. "There she is," she announced. Her voice cut through the sanctuary like broken glass. "Don't let that uniform fool you." A gasp moved through the congregation. I stayed perfectly still. Officer posture, hands flat against my thighs. Controlled breathing. The same discipline that had carried me through storms, emergencies, and deployments. But no military training prepares you for your own mother, especially when she's smiling, especially when she's certain she's about to win. Then a sound echoed from the back of the church. Metal tapping against stone. Slow, uneven. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway. Half his face was covered in burn scars. One side of his neck looked melted and rebuilt. His right hand curled inward unnaturally. The kind of injuries people survive only once. The room fell silent. The man stared directly at me. Not at the pastor, not at my mother, only me. His eyes widened, then filled with tears. "It's you!" The whisper carried through the sanctuary. My mother's smile vanished. The man took another step, then another, and suddenly dropped to his knees in the center aisle. A hymn book slipped from someone's hands and crashed against the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "For 8 years," the man whispered, staring at me through tears, "I've been trying to find the woman who saved my life." And in that moment, sitting inside that church while my mother watched her perfect story begin to collapse around her, I was no longer a Navy officer. I was 12 years old again, standing barefoot on a porch, waiting for my father to come home. The last normal day of my life ended at 10:58 p.m. I remember because my father checked his watch before leaving. James Walker, Navy veteran, volunteer firefighter, the strongest man I ever knew. He grabbed his gear from the hall closet and bent down to kiss my forehead. "Back soon, kiddo." I rolled my eyes. "You always say that." He grinned. "Because I'm always right." That was the last conversation we ever had. The fire call came from a house across town. Child trapped on the second floor. My father didn't hesitate. He never did. That was who he was. The kind of man who moved toward danger while everyone else moved away. By 1:13 a.m., the police scanner crackled. By 1:30 a.m., neighbors were gathering outside. By 2 a.m., I knew. Nobody had told me yet, but I knew. The porch light illuminated faces that wouldn't meet my eyes. And somehow that told me everything. My father wasn't coming home. The official confirmation arrived minutes later, but my heart had already figured it out. I remember my mother collapsing onto the front steps. I remember her screaming. I remember Brianna crying, and I remember standing 3 feet away, waiting for someone to pull me close, waiting for someone to tell me it would be okay, waiting for my mother to reach for me the way she reached for Brianna. She never did. She wrapped both arms around my little sister and held her so tightly it looked painful. I stood there alone, watching. At 12 years old, I learned something nobody should ever have to learn. Grief doesn't always bring families together. Sometimes it reveals where you already stood. After Dad died, the house changed. Not all at once, little by little, like someone quietly removing pieces of a picture. His photographs disappeared first. One day, the framed picture beside the fireplace was gone. A week later, the hallway portrait vanished. Then the family albums, then the uniforms, then the stories. Eventually, it became strange to even say his name. But there was one thing my mother couldn't erase: me. I had my father's eyes, his jawline, his quiet habits. Every time she looked at me, she saw him. And I think that hurt more than she could handle, so she stopped looking. Not hatred, not anger, something colder. Avoidance. Like I was a wound she couldn't stop reopening. Brianna became the center of everything. Birthday parties, new clothes, dance lessons, school photos, praise, attention, love. I got chores. At 13, I cooked dinner most nights. The smell of frying oil soaked into my school uniform.
Sometimes I'd stand over the stove stirring pasta while Brianna watched television and Mom flipped through bridal magazines with friends. Nobody asked how school was. Nobody asked if I was tired. Nobody noticed. After dinner, I'd wash dishes until my fingers wrinkled, then sit at the kitchen table and finish homework, the television laughing in the next room. My family existing around me without ever really seeing me. At 14, I stopped expecting thank you. At 15, I stopped expecting anything. That same year, I placed first in a statewide academic competition. I remember carrying the certificate home, holding it carefully so it wouldn't bend. For once, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this would matter. Maybe she'd finally look at me. I placed it in the center of the kitchen table, perfectly straight. Then I waited. My mother walked in, looked down, read it, nodded once, a single nod, then turned toward Brianna. "Did you pick your birthday dress yet?" That was it. No congratulations, no smile, no pride, nothing. I stood there for several seconds, then quietly picked up the certificate. That night I folded it in half, placed it inside my desk drawer, and something inside me closed. Not dramatically, not painfully, just permanently. I stopped waiting. A few weeks later, I found the photograph, hidden behind old textbooks in a storage box. Dad, 23 years old, navy dress whites, standing straight, eyes steady, fearless. The photograph felt like treasure, proof that I hadn't imagined him, proof that someone in this world had once looked at me and seen something worth loving. I hid the picture inside my geometry book. Every night before bed, I'd open it, just for a few seconds, and imagine what he would have said. Because somehow, even after death, he still felt more present than anyone living in that house. That photograph changed everything. At 16, I secretly researched Navy ROTC programs. At 17, I filled out applications nobody knew existed, built a future nobody asked about, made plans nobody helped create. And when the acceptance letter arrived, I read it alone, then folded it carefully beside Dad's photograph. The only two things in my room that truly belonged to me. The morning I left home arrived before sunrise, 5:30 a.m. The house was completely silent. I carried a canvas duffel bag down the hallway, paused outside my mother's bedroom. No movement, no light, no goodbye. I looked at Brianna's closed door. Nothing there either. The acceptance letter sat inside my bag, Dad's photograph tucked safely between its pages. I opened the front door, stepped outside, and pulled it shut softly behind me. The Greyhound bus waited at the curb, engine rumbling, headlights glowing against the dark morning. I climbed aboard and found a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away, I looked back one last time. The house stayed dark. No curtain moved. No door opened. Nobody came outside. I watched it disappear anyway. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out my father's photograph, and held it against my chest. Because if nobody else was coming with me, he was. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally heading somewhere that might actually see me. The Navy was the first place that asked something different from me. Not whether I was lovable, Not whether I was worth noticing. Not whether I belonged. Only one question mattered. Could I carry my weight when things got hard? For the first time in my life, the answer was enough. ROTC became Officer Candidate School. Officer Candidate School became a commission. The nervous girl who once stood alone in a kitchen smelling like frying oil and loneliness became Ensign Sierra Walker, United States Navy. The day they pinned my rank onto my uniform, I reached into my pocket afterward and touched my father's photograph. Not because I was sad, because I wanted him there. Everyone else had family in the crowd. Parents, brothers, sisters, grandparents, people cheering, people crying, people taking pictures. I had a folded photograph of a man who'd been gone for years, and somehow it still felt like more support than I'd ever received at home. The Navy didn't make life easier. It made it honest. Storms didn't care about your feelings. Ships didn't care about your childhood. Responsibility didn't care whether anyone loved you. Either you performed or you didn't. Either people could trust you or they couldn't. And I discovered something surprising. I was good at it. Very good. Years passed. Deployments came and went. I learned how to stand watch in darkness so complete the ocean seemed to disappear. I learned how to make decisions when seconds mattered. How to stay calm while everyone else panicked. How to carry responsibility without complaining about its weight. The promotions followed. Ensign. Lieutenant junior grade. Lieutenant. Each rank came with more pressure. More people depending on me. More lives connected to my choices. But every promotion carried the same strange feeling. The people I worked with believed in me more than the people who raised me. One winter deployment, I was standing watch on the bridge at 3 o'clock in the morning. Outside, the ocean was black. The sky was black. The horizon had vanished completely. It felt like our ship was floating through empty space. A young sailor stood beside me, fresh out of training. Nervous, trying not to show it. After a difficult maneuver, he finally exhaled. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm glad you're on watch." I looked at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because when things go bad, everybody gets calmer when you're here." The words hit harder than he knew. Not because they were extraordinary, because nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Not at home, not growing up, not once. For the rest of that watch, I stared into the darkness beyond the ship and thought about how strange life was. Strangers trusted me with their lives. My own family barely trusted me with a conversation. The phone calls home never changed. Every Sunday, 7 minutes, almost exactly. The pattern became so predictable I could have written it down. 2 minutes about me, 5 minutes about Brianna. "How are you?" "Good." "Ship okay?" "Yes." Then immediately, Brianna's new apartment, Brianna's engagement plans, Brianna's future, Brianna's wedding. Brianna, Brianna, Brianna. Every call ended the same way. "I sent this month's transfer." "Mm-hmm." Click. Dial tone. No thank you. No questions. No curiosity. No concern. Never once did my mother ask whether I was safe. Never once did she ask whether deployment was difficult. Never once did she ask if I was lonely. I would stare at the black phone screen for a few seconds after every call, then put it away and return to work, the place where I actually mattered. The money transfers started small. A little help with bills. A little help with repairs. A little help because family was family. At least that was what I told myself. Years passed. The transfers grew larger. Deployment pay, sea pay, hazard bonuses, tax refunds, investment returns. Every month I sent something home. Not because anyone demanded it, because my father would have helped. and I wanted to be more like him than the people who had forgotten him. By the time I finally calculated everything, the number stunned even me. More than $100,000. Enough for a house. Enough to change a life. Maybe several lives. Then came Brianna's final year of college. My mother called crying. Said tuition was overdue. Said Brianna might lose her place. Said the family needed help. I wired the money immediately. No hesitation. No questions. 3 months later, while reviewing account activity during a deployment, I noticed something strange. The payment never reached the university. My stomach tightened. I contacted the school's financial office myself. After several phone calls, the truth emerged. The tuition had never been paid. The money was gone, spent elsewhere. Shopping, travel, entertainment. I sat alone in a dim operations room staring at the screen, the ship's engines vibrating beneath my boots, the blue glow of monitors reflecting off steel walls. For a long time, I simply sat there. Then I paid the tuition a second time. Not because Brianna deserved it, because her education didn't deserve to become collateral damage. And I never told anyone. The wedding came next. Custom dress, venue deposit, catering, decorations, photography. Every month another expense appeared. Every month another transfer left my account. Every month another conversation happened without an invitation. I funded portions of a wedding I wasn't even asked to attend. At first I thought it was an oversight. Then I realized something worse. Nobody had forgotten me. They simply hadn't considered me important enough to include. That realization hurt far well. One night after another 7-minute phone call, I stood alone on the main deck. The Pacific stretched endlessly in every direction. Cold wind whipped across the water. Stars reflected on black waves. I gripped the silver anchor pendant beneath my uniform. Dad's pendant. The only thing of his I still carried. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think something I'd spent years avoiding. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone at home notice? The answer arrived too quickly, and that frightened me. A month later, I went on leave. That was when I saw the fire. At first it looked distant, just smoke against the night sky. Then I turned a corner and saw flames. An apartment building. Second floor fully involved. Windows exploding. Smoke pouring upward like a black storm cloud. People crowded outside, shouting, recording, pointing. Nobody moving. Nobody going in. My father flashed through my mind. Not as memory, as instinct. I was already running before the thought finished forming. Inside, heat slammed into me like a physical wall. The hallway was almost completely dark. Smoke swallowed everything. Training took over. One hand on the wall, stay low, move forward, listen. Somewhere deeper inside the building I heard a groan, a human sound, weak, desperate. I followed it. A man lay trapped beneath a collapsed beam, unconscious, pinned. I grabbed the timber and pulled. Nothing. Pulled again, still nothing. My muscles screamed. On the third attempt it shifted, just enough. I dragged him free, hooked his arm over my shoulder, and started toward the exit. The ceiling above us groaned. Something crashed somewhere behind me. The building was dying, fast. Halfway down the hallway, my hand slammed against a metal door frame. White hot. Pain exploded through my palm. The smell of burning skin hit instantly. Every instinct screamed to let go. I couldn't, because letting go meant dropping him, and dropping him meant death. So I kept moving, step by step, burning, coughing, falling once, standing again. Closer, closer, almost there. Then daylight exploded ahead. We stumbled through the exit seconds before part of the roof collapsed behind us. The sound shook the ground. People screamed. Paramedics rushed forward. Someone grabbed the man from my arms. I should have stopped there. Most people would have. But then I heard something, a voice, faint from inside. Another victim, still trapped. Without thinking, I turned around. Someone shouted. A firefighter grabbed for my arm. I pulled free and went back in. The second trip was worse, hotter, darker, more dangerous. The building was already beginning to fail, but I found her. A woman trapped beneath debris, barely conscious. I dragged her toward the exit while pieces of ceiling crashed around us. The roar above sounded like thunder. Then we broke through the smoke, out into open air. Seconds later, the ceiling collapsed completely. The crowd erupted, but I barely heard it, because my burned hand felt like it was on fire all over again, and because I already knew what would happen next. Nobody would know my name. And somehow that was okay, because my father hadn't taught me to run into fires for recognition. He taught me to run into them because somebody was still inside. The church remained frozen as I stood in the center aisle. 200 people, 200 witnesses, and for the first time in my life, none of them were looking away. The burned man slowly rose from his seat. His scarred hand trembled as he rested it against the pew for balance. But his voice was steady, steadier than mine, steadier than my mother's. I spent 8 years looking for her. Every head turned toward him. The sanctuary felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. The man swallowed. When I woke up in the hospital, they told me a woman pulled me out of the fire. His eyes found mine. They didn't know her name. A pause. But I never forgot her face. Silence. Complete silence. The kind that hurts your ears. I searched every year. His voice cracked. Every year. He lifted his burned hand. I wanted to thank the person who gave me the chance to watch my daughter graduate. A woman near the front row covered her mouth. The burned man continued. I wanted to thank the person who gave me the chance to walk my daughter down the aisle. His voice broke completely. And now she's standing right there. He pointed at me. Not dramatically, not angrily, simply truth. And somehow that was worse. Because truth didn't need volume, it only needed witnesses. My mother shifted, just slightly, but everyone saw it. The first crack. Then another voice rose, an elderly woman from the third row, a church elder. She slowly stood, hands shaking, eyes locked on me. I remember the fire. The congregation turned. She nodded slowly. I volunteered as a paramedic that night. My mother's face went pale. The elder continued. The report said a naval officer entered before clearance was given. A pause. Twice. Murmurs spread instantly. People began turning toward one another, whispering, remembering, questioning. My mother stepped forward. No. Her voice sounded different now, smaller. They don't know what they're talking about. But another man stood, then another, then another. A retired firefighter, a former police officer, people who remembered fragments, pieces, details, all of them aligning, like a puzzle finally revealing the picture underneath. I saw the report. I remember hearing about it. There was footage from a news helicopter. The officer was never identified. The room shifted, not toward me, away from her, and she felt it. For years my mother had controlled the story, the forgotten daughter, the selfish daughter, the daughter who didn't care about family, the daughter who abandoned home. That story had worked because nobody ever heard mine. Now they were, and she couldn't stop it. The burned man reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully. He unfolded an old document. The paper was yellow, edges darkened by age, partially burned. He held it up. I carried this for 8 years. His finger touched a single paragraph. The church leaned forward, even the pastor. Unknown female Navy officer re-entered structure despite evacuation orders and successfully completed secondary victim extraction. Gasps, loud this time. No one tried to hide them. The man looked at me. You went back. I stared at the paper, my throat tightened. Because hearing it spoken out loud made it real. I remembered smoke, heat, screaming, fragments, but not the whole thing. Not until now. The man nodded. You saved 2 people. The church erupted into whispers. My mother looked trapped, like someone watching floodwater rise. Then I reached into my uniform and removed the black folder. the one I had carried for months, the one I never wanted to open. The room fell silent again. People recognized seriousness when they saw it. I placed the folder on the front pew, opened it, and looked directly at my mother. Not with anger, not with hatred, with exhaustion. "You used my name." The words landed like a hammer. Several people actually gasped. My mother's head snapped up. "That's a lie." Too fast, too loud, too defensive. Everyone noticed. I removed the first document, a loan agreement, $47,000. My name, my military information, my address, a forged signature. I turned it toward the congregation. The reaction was immediate. Hands over mouths, people standing, shock spreading row by row like a wave. My mother took a step forward. "That's not what it looks like." I flipped another page. Bank records, transfer histories, account statements. Year after year, transaction after transaction, money moving. Not accidentally, not occasionally, systematically. I sent money home for 12 years. My voice stayed calm. The calm frightened people more than yelling ever could. I believed it was helping my family. I turned another page. Brianna's name appeared repeatedly. Wedding deposits, venue payments, luxury purchases, credit card balances, vacation expenses. The church stared. Somebody whispered, "Oh my God." I continued. My deployment pay funded a wedding I wasn't invited to. No one spoke. No one moved. The sentence hung there, heavy, unavoidable. Then came the tuition records. I placed them beside the loan documents. Brianna's university tuition. A pause. I paid it. Another pause. Twice. The congregation looked confused. I turned the paperwork around. The first payment disappeared. The room collectively inhaled. My sister spent it. Silence. Then I finished. So I paid again. An elderly man lowered his head. A woman quietly began crying. Not because of money, because everyone suddenly understood who I had been all these years. Not selfish, not absent, not uncaring. Sacrificial, to a fault. My mother's composure shattered. "This is family business." Her voice cracked. "This doesn't belong here." For years, that sentence would have stopped me. Not anymore. No. The word cut clean. It became public the moment you stole using my name. The room froze, because nobody could argue with that. Then I opened the final section. Identity fraud investigations, legal consultations, financial reviews, evidence. Pages and pages of evidence. I could have filed charges. My mother looked at me. For the first time, there was fear in her eyes. Real fear. I didn't. Silence. I couldn't bring myself to destroy my own family. The words hit harder than anything else, because everyone in the room knew exactly what that mercy had cost me. The pastor finally stood, slowly, carefully. His expression was heavy. Not angry, disappointed. He looked at my mother first, then at the documents, then at me. And finally he spoke. 3 words, 3 devastating words. "Let truth stand." The sanctuary went completely silent, because everyone understood what that meant. The pastor wasn't siding with emotion. He wasn't siding with popularity. He was siding with facts. And my mother knew she had lost. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the burned man stepped beside me. Not in front, beside. A witness. The church elder remained standing. Another witness. Then the retired firefighter. Another witness. One by one, people rose. Not cheering, not applauding, simply standing. For truth. The sight nearly broke me, because my entire life I had stood alone. And suddenly I wasn't. I looked down. My hand found the anchor pendant beneath my uniform. Dad's pendant. The metal felt cool against my skin. For a moment I could almost hear his voice. "Back soon, kiddo." The last thing he ever said to me. A strange peace settled over me. Not victory, not revenge. Something better. Closure. I looked at my mother one final time. The woman who spent years trying to erase me. The woman who convinced an entire community I was less than what I was. And suddenly I realized something. She hadn't destroyed me. She'd only refused to see me. There was a difference. A very important difference. I closed the folder. The sound echoed softly through the sanctuary. Final. Complete. Finished. Then I spoke the last words I had carried for 20 years. You didn't lose a daughter today. A pause. The entire church held its breath. You lost the ability to pretend you never had one. No one moved. No one spoke. I turned toward the exit, walked down the aisle, past 200 silent witnesses, past years of lies, past years of waiting. My hand resting lightly on my father's pendant. And for the first time, since I was 12 years old, standing barefoot on a porch waiting for someone to come home, I wasn't invisible anymore.